Hi everybody. Good time to start. My name is Alexander Leonov. This morning I'd like to discuss vulnerability databases and how protection analysis systems has been evolving. I represent .mail.ru group. Prior to discussing vulnerability databases, it's worthwhile saying that any vulnerability is just an error, software error or gap allowing a hacker to do magic things. Normally, software developers and vendors post information about such vulnerabilities on their websites. And there are tons and tons of websites and products and software. If vendor's approach to vulnerability accounting is proper, he turns to micro corporation to say, look, a vulnerability on my website has been identified. Why don't you make up an identifier for it? It's not just new RT in Firefox. It's SVE 2017 something and so on and so forth, and you can refer to it in exploit databases and all the other sort of databases in the media. Everybody writing about the importance of this very critical vulnerability and so forth. What should a normal, ordinary user or security analyst do in this situation, given that he or she is expected to protect his or her company, and he or she needs to write all those parsers to deal with all those sources, to put them in a database, and to somehow write scripts capable of coping with it? Should there be such a need, there'll for sure be a request for proposal, commercial offers to meet this demand. And there are such offers. Those parsers will be collected and offered to ordinary users. Moreover, a vendor may come to a customer, a prospect, to ask, what do you need for you to be able to use our database at ease? And there are some requirements. And then we see a search engine for vulnerabilities. However, it's not cool looking for vulnerabilities manually. It can be like this. Well, we want to enter requirements once in order to then some bot do the job for us in an automated manner. And then such a customer can say, look, we don't fully understand what we want or need. Why don't you just show us those most critical things on your own? And here we are with intelligent services, whatever it might mean. It would be great if those results could be integrated with other enterprise systems. And here we are with vulnerability databases with their own IP addresses. There are plenty of such databases. I prefer those on the bottom. I prefer Slenders because they contain a lot of various objects, everything being free of charge. You can retrieve the entire database free of charge. But we can go even further and beyond this. A user may come to a vendor or vulnerability database developer and say, it's not enough for us to see those vulnerabilities. We want to see those vulnerabilities that threaten ourselves. And the vendor would say, I can write detection rules and policies for your vulnerabilities, those most critical for you. And here we are with vulnerability scanner and all those dashboards and task managers and task scripts. Let's call them vulnerability managers. We make our decision as to what's important for us or not, what's not important, and we get a risk management or threat management system. But we should not forget that it is still a vulnerability database. And when you're looking for something or selecting something with all those dashboards, you shouldn't forget that your main objective is to make sure that in your vulnerability database you have as many vulnerabilities as possible. And you should always know what's in there and what's not. And the latter is even more important. You should know what can be detected automatically and what cannot and why. If anything can be detected automatically, you should know about the frequency of updates. And the main task of security analysts in any company is to be aware at all times what may require patching or debugging, for which no scanner is required. It is enough to get updates from some source on a regular basis. Normally, we respond to the vulnerabilities that are mentioned in Harbor, for instance. Then we engage in responding to all of them. Then we identify that those are most critical for our organization. And then, at the next maturity stage, we automatically validate applicability of vulnerabilities to our infrastructure. And here is an example of such mailing from Telegram. I subscribe to all the open SAH vulnerabilities starting from some date, which may be the most recent open SAH update. And this thing will be operable even when our scanner is not operable. In the scanner is nothing. This is the output that we will be getting. And we can drill down to the description of particular vulnerability. The next big question is how to distinguish between the important and non-important things. When there is the next WannaCry, how to identify it in the total vulnerability flow. We can monitor Harbor vulnerabilities, those posted on other resources too. It's not that difficult drawing a logo and designing a fancy name for a vulnerability. One can also use CBSS. It's just a questionnaire, actually. You enter your question or reference words or keywords. In NVD, they believe that vector should be like this, while Tunable thinks differently. And here you are with different severity level. CBSS version 3 is not truly instrumental to deal with it. Our idea was as follows. Why don't we look at links Which objects are linked with our vulnerabilities in order to identify the severity level of vulnerabilities? I came up with two measurements: severity or threat level and relevance level. The first one based on availability of malware, interest of potential malefactors to this particular vulnerability, while the relevance depends upon the attention paid to this particular vulnerability by everybody, including media, vendors issuing patches, those engaged in analyzing protection level. With these two measurements, we can come up with this magic quadrant. Up on the right-hand side, we see leading threats, while in the left there are just routine things. And at any point in time, you can see which objects are linked with your vulnerability, and based on this information, you can change the position of a vulnerability in this quadrant. For example, Heartbleed used to be a very critical threat. However, over time, it was moved here, and this is WannaCry. Not WannaCry proper, but any SMB vulnerability. It used to be not really critical. And there were patches available for this vulnerability. It's been available since the very first day. This is data as of March, but we shouldn't forget about the month of May. With all its agitation, everybody writing about WannaCry and the epidemics of computer network infection. I got 3,500 of vulnerabilities for the past 6 months and tried to analyze their dynamics, especially those of them that were active for longer than 10 days. Here you can see data for Apple products, their RCs. There are also vulnerabilities that are present in products that they're always vulnerable, such as Microsoft browser. They are exploitable too, which means that they are also dangerous. However, they don't draw this much attention, and normally from the upper part of the quadrant they go down and down. I removed the vulnerabilities that may have been in the lower part of the quadrant too long. Otherwise, the situation will be like this. This is what's going to happen to your infrastructure if it's not patched on a regular basis. And my main message is as follows: do it. Patch your infrastructure on a regular basis, otherwise you'll find yourselves in this situation. And this is a set of tools for vulnerability prioritization, with its advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages being these: one needs to build up metrics and indices, and everything will eventually depend upon the quality of your accounting. If you apply the same criteria to all the vulnerabilities, the picture will hardly change for the better. Well, that's it actually. Thank you very much for your attention. And if there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask them. How about RC for iOS or Mac? Let me get back to my slide. There used to be something really important in 2017. There were RCs for both iOS and Mac Watch, I watch. I know it was three-staged. First it was video, then rights violation, then something else. That is the way they call it, RCE. I don't know what it stands for. Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. Yesterday, there was a presentation showing that zero-day jungle vulnerability was first exploited after 24 hours, and after 36 hours there were already automated botnet network signs. Everything is in daily routine here just because of repetitions, but it's also necessary to measure the response time. If there is a vulnerability open in botnet networks and there is no patch for it, well, it is something. I agree. I totally agree. And I showed you what it depended upon. You get more objective data if you increase the number of factors. With intelligence included, that is what you'll get. Let's make this information publicly available. Well, with this, our estimates will be more accurate.